Okay, hi everyone. I am Almona. I'd like to start off by letting you know that I am a person who stutters, and stuttering is a speech disorder. So when you do hear me stuttering, you do know what's going on. I'm definitely more than happy to have a conversation with anyone about that after the conference. But right now, I'll be speaking to you all about a project that I'm a partner worked on over this past summer at Carnegie Mellon on the effectiveness of pressing in soccer. So a few key terms, right? I know everyone knows these terms, but so a pressing is a defensive tactic where players apply coordinated pressure on the opponent with the ball to force mistakes, win back possession, or quickly transition into attack. And a forced turnover is when a player loses possession of the ball due to opponent pressure, resulting in the opposing team gaining control. So I know that this is a lot of words, and if you're anyone like me, it's best to like see what a person actually looks like. So this is a game between Manchester City and Spurs. I am a Spurs fan, and we can see Spurs are playing the ball out from the defensive third, and immediately two City players press the player with the ball, and three more come in to add more pressure, and eventually Man City are able to regain the ball from Spurs, and they could have transitioned that into an attack. But this is essentially what a pressing event looks like. So to continue with this project, we sourced our files. We sourced our files from Skill Corner, so I appreciate you all, Skill Corner, and we had access to 520 games of the MLS 2023 season. Now, 18 of those games were not able to be used because there was no event file for them. So we took three steps in order to see this project to completion. The first is to identify when a press occurs using player tracking data. So in the clip that I showed you earlier, say we never saw the clip, how are we able to identify that that is a press? After that, we then defined the criteria for an effective press, and then we looked at our results. So at the start of the project, we first identified a pressure zone as being anywhere within 6 meters of the player with the ball. But after looking online and reading a lot of papers about pressing, we then realized that this approach doesn't account for direction, and it oversimplifies the whole idea of pressing. And a paper that we looked at kind of proposed this new shape of a pressure zone, and we can see that there is a lot more space in front of the player than at the back. And this kind of tells us that it's more important to press a player from the front than at the back. Now, aside from being within this pressure zone, the only other criteria for a press that we included was that the ball carrier must be approaching, is that the defender must be approaching the ball carrier at a speed threshold of 1 meter per second. Now, we included this speed threshold there because we plan to exclude any cases of passive or pressing. We didn't want a case where a player just happened to find themselves in the pressure zone ball, but they aren't engaging or trying to get the ball from the ball carrier. Now, after doing this and identifying the individual pressing actions, we then group these pressing actions into pressing sequences where at least one defender continued pressing within 1.5 seconds. And from all the games that we had, we were able to identify over 200,000 pressing sequences. Next, what exactly is an effective press? Now, the goal of a press is to regain the ball from the attacking team. So we definitely feel like the impact of a pressing should extend beyond getting the ball at that point, because a pressing can force the team into unfavorable positions on the pitch, who could eventually lead the team to then turn the ball over. So for this project, we defined the effectiveness of a press as turning the ball over after 5 seconds of the start of the press. And then after doing that, we were able to extract about 31 features from the player tracking data yeah. So we then compared this across 5 using a tenfold cross validation with match rate splits to prevent any um, um, problems. And for our XGBoost, we tuned our hyperparameters on a 50% stratified sample of our data, because at the time we tried to tune it on the whole, on everything, we ran into some computational problems. Now, this table shows the outcomes of everything that we ran. Now, I know that this is a lot of numbers, but I'm just going to point out two things. So look at the precision column and the column after that. We can see that the precision columns are high, but then we can see that the precision numbers are high, but then across the board, all of them find a hard time to pick out when a press occurs, because all of the values in the recall column are pretty low, and we attributed this low value to the fact that that in everything we had, about 77% of the pressing sequences did not end up in a forced turnover after 5 seconds, and because of this big change, it's able to identify more when a press does not occur than when a press occurs. The next is to look at the first column, which is the performance across the board. We can see that it looks about the same. We can see that the XGBoost has the best score at about 0.43, but I mean, that doesn't really look far off from the other four. And if you're doing any project, you definitely know that at this point, the best thing to do is to pick the most parsimonious one. But then we chose to take this to the next step, and we carried out a paired t-test. And from the paired t-test, on this confidence interval plot, we can see that in reality, the XGBoost outperforms all the other one at a statistically significant level. So we chose to continue with the XGBoost. Now, after aggregating this across each team, we see that the New York Red Bulls pressed the best. And I think that this is interesting because after looking, I went in to look at the head coach, and it says that the head coach has a philosophy of being a high intensity, a high intent and pressing team. And after that is the St. Louis City Club. And this is also very interesting because this was our first season playing in the MLS. And apparently the head coach of St. Louis FC was the assistant head coach at the New York Red Bulls the season prior. So we can see that they shared the same principle of being a pressing team. So the next thing we did was to compare this to PPD. And PPD is the number of opposition passes allowed outside of a pressing team's own defensive third divided by the number of defensive actions by the pressing team outside their own defensive third. Now, a lower figure indicates higher level of pressing, while a higher figure indicates a lower level of pressing. Now, if all that was confusing, I just want you to know that PPD measures pressing aggressiveness, while what we did measures pressing effectiveness. So is there even any point of comparing these two? Like, they do measure pressing, but not the same way. So I like to think of this as if you plot the number of shots a team takes in a season and the number of goals they score, you definitely see a correlation between them. So we wanted to see if that existed in this, as PPD is definitely the most accepted way of quantifying our pressing. And we can see that there is some correlation between PPD and our projects. So this tells us that we did somewhat of a good job in quantifying some aspect of pressing. Now, a very important thing is the variable importance. And looking at the XGBoost, we realized that the variable start type contributed approximately 70% of the model's importance. And this variable describes how the ball carrier got in possession of the ball. Now, in Skill Corner, they had about 14 categories, but we put them down into 5, which are reception, interception, recovery, keeps possession, and unknown. And when we looked at the raw rows, we found that about 74% of all pressing sequences that began with the ball player gaining the ball from an interception turn eventually became a forced turnover in the next 5 seconds. And this could be because when a team intercepts the ball, they probably aren't in the best shape to kind of keep the ball. So from a coaching's perspective, you could say that a team should press once you lose the ball. So there's obviously limitations and future works to be done. An example is that this project was only done on the MLS 2023 season, so it's hard to kind of compare this across leagues that have other physical demands and player qualities. And the fact that we grouped the individual pressing actions into pressing sequences means that we can't evaluate this on an individual level. And to our work, you could also add pressing intensity calculations and pitch control, and a lot more work could be done on the shape of the pressure zone. I'd like to thank everyone who was involved in this, in helping us, and you can scan that for our report. Thank you.